So my name is Tamika Royce. I reside in Thornhill. I born and raised in Toronto, cradle Catholic. Um, and also I am currently a student in the Masters of Arts in Theology at Regis St. Michael's College in the Toronto School of Theology at University of Toronto.
I'm Dr. Rosalma McDonald. I'm Mohawk from Akwesasne near Cornwall, Ontario, and I am the Indigenous advisor to the Archdiocese of Ottawa, Cornwall.
My name is Candida Shepherd. I am a teacher and currently an acting vice principal at a school in Edmonton, Alberta.
I'm Donna Schroeder. I'm married, 3 children and 6 grandchildren, 5 grandsons, and 1 granddaughter. We live in Rothesay, New Brunswick.
All right. My name is Matthew Snowden, and I am involved in ministry in the province of Ontario. For the last 5 years, I've been a chaplain in Catholic education. When Journey of Encounter came up, I was really ready to join in and participate.
Okay, so my name is Laura Carendang, and I am the pastoral assistant at St. Joseph the Worker Parish in Richmond, BC. So that has me looking after our faith formation, journeying alongside our liturgical practices. So a little bit of everything here. And what brought me to Journey of Encounter actually was we had a pastor here, Father Pierre Ducharme, who was also at the conference. And when he came here 8 years ago now, one of the first things he did was we did listening circles through Sunday suppers and different events to come up with our own parish priorities. And so we kind of were steeped in this method of synodality without us even realizing that that's what we were doing. So when the synod came on, it was something we jumped right into as a parish, really under his leadership. And he was so, and still is, so excited and passionate about it that it didn't take long for myself and a few others of us that are on the parish team to kind of jump right along there with him. And so when Journey of Encounter came up, he had said he'd been invited to speak, and he saw it as some of us going along with him. And then at the same time, he was also moving on to other things. And so he was leaving our parish just after that. And so it was kind of a way for us to do our last one big thing together. So myself and another colleague, Chelsea, and Pierre went down.
From June 15th to 18th in 2025, Concerned Lay Catholics hosted a synodal gathering in partnership with participants in the Rome Synod on Synodality and members of other Canadian Catholic dioceses and organizations. The event was attended by 135 people from every province in Canada and generously supported by sponsors from coast to coast. This was more than an event. It was a pilgrimage of hope. Participants engaged in conversations in the Spirit, sitting in circles, sharing their stories, listening, and being silent. Together, we envisioned a more listening, inclusive church in Canada, one rooted in Indigenous reconciliation and lay involvement.
Was right away when I saw it, wanting to take part in it, and then more information kept coming about, and eventually registration opened, and I was there.
Well, he said it was going to be at the university and that we would be staying in the dorms and that it was a very important opportunity, to talk about synodality. But I think his bigger, sell, so to speak, was there needs to be Indigenous representation there, and you need to come.
I was actually asked to participate from the school where I did my diploma in Catholic Studies, which is Assumption University. So the vice chancellor there learned about this opportunity, and he shared with a number of us as students.
I would say that the national scope of Journey of Encounter was something that drew me in. This was beyond the local or the diocesan, and rather a gathering of a bunch of different people from across the country in all sorts of ministry contexts that wanted to get together and really see how synodality could work in Canada.
I would love us to be involved in my local community with a vibrant church where everyone is welcome. And I felt when I heard Journey of Encounter, I thought I will hopefully connect with people who have the same feelings, the same vision, and the same passions that I have.
It was really an opportunity to really connect with other people across the country that were experiencing or interested or geeking out over synodality the same way we did. Um, and also for a part of it, like we were having a lot of changes in our own little world at that time because we were having a change of pastors still within the OFMs, so that wasn't too scary, but there was change coming, but also just had a new bishop installed here. So, we don't know what was to come. And but really was that opportunity to connect with others who were as passionate about it as we are.
It was this place for synergy to happen that, by getting together in person for 4 days, we could really learn about and experience synodality in real time. There was an experiential part of it that also attracted me in terms of, conversations in the spirit were going to be happening there and then. It was like our own mini synod. It wasn't just learning about it, but it was doing it as well.
Working towards truth and reconciliation has always been an important part of what I do, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's working with Catholic social services, whether it is working in the church. So that has always been a big move for me. And knowing that I was going to be going to the encounter, I knew that was the voice I was bringing. So I was excited for it to be kind of put out on a national level, but I had no idea at all what to expect. I just knew that that was my focus, that when I came, that I was going to learn about how to be a little bit more, to bring that Indigenous voice to kind of the Catholic circle. And I was quite excited about that. My whole life has always been in the church. I'm Indigenous first, Catholic second. And what that means to me is that if the Catholic Church is good for my people, then I'm glad to be there. But it was always Indigenous first. And I never kind of expected for the Catholic part to be so exuberating and exciting, and the whole idea of kind of focusing on the spiritual part of it rather than just the Indigenous part of it was something I didn't expect by the time it was done.
Liturgy and prayer permeated the entire experience. From Sunday Mass in the chapel to the retreat with Greg Kennedy, to Taizé evening prayer, morning meditation, morning and evening prayer, Indigenous ceremonies, and the concluding Eucharistic liturgy and commissioning service led by Bishop Douglas Crosby.
That was the first Mass where I experienced smudging. And that lit a fire under me, so much so that I enrolled in a course called Indigenous Christianity this term.
I really enjoyed the liturgies. I thought they were good for the soul. They were inspiring. They were participative. They were empowering. And they were truly, the work of the people.
Then we would have chapel in the evening, and I've never been in a setting where it was so, like, the singing was amazing, and um, I was marveled at just how the beauty and the spirit would move, and just like I've never. We're so very kind of rough around the edges. You don't have that sense of. Oh, I don't know how to explain it, but just it was just there was such beauty in the singing and in the reverence, and in you could just feel the spirit moving when we were in chapel at the end of the day. And I've rarely been in a situation where I've experienced that. So I really enjoyed the chapel. And even one of my travel mates, she said, I was watching you the whole time, and I can't believe how much joy and how much you seem to be enjoying the singing. And it's because I haven't heard that kind of spiritual beauty in the singing of old hymns that I may remember as a child, but really have not experienced since. And that yet it was there. It was just, you could just feel it pulsing in the room, and you could just feel the spirituality. So that part surprised me, and it really touched me.
I loved the format. I loved how we gathered every morning for Mass, for prayer. That to me, and the plus being able to meditate, those quiet moments, to me was ideal. It helped set the tone for our gatherings. I think that the committee who planned this 4-day event spent a lot of time, and the prayer to me helped to center us and helped us to enter into the experience in a positive way. I think it totally set the tone.
What a joy it is to greet you as you are together at St. Jerome's University in Waterloo for this beautiful initiative. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the organizers and participants who have made this gathering possible. Your commitment to embracing synodality in Canada is an inspiring example of what is now flourishing all around the world in the implementation phase of our synodal journey.
I just want to start off by saying how excited I am to be here, how grateful I am. The song that we ended with last night, the Taizé, the song really touched me, that, in the Lord I will be thankful. Because I remember, months ago, over a year ago, talking about this with Kathy and other folks in our planning group, and like, should we do this? And here we are. I pitched her when we were here yesterday. I'm like, it's real, it's happening.
Each one was unique. I think that the planning committee, I thought, did an excellent job as far as scheduling the speakers. And so I have the list here in front of me, but everyone came with a different gift.
People came from all different experiences off synodality, but I really felt like everybody really was open to entering into that process. And like I've had experiences where I'm always having to remind people, no, you have to stop, you have to just wait, don't respond. But I don't recall that being a big issue there. Like people were there wanting to learn more about what it was and really open to having those conversations, which was neat.
Definitely the presentation from Carol and Terry Sullivan, just sharing their life as a Catholic couple, how they met, and how they raised children, and are still doing so. But then they talked about their experience being parents of a trans child, and the way they spoke about the Eucharist and being broken pieces coming together as the body of Christ when we all receive was really powerful. I remember being very moved to tears, as well as someone at my table. And it was the personal testimony of the difficulty that they'd been carrying and facing, being members of the church having this experience as parents, while also it was a grace-filled experience in a way too, that the way they were talking about it was, so raw and real and sacramental in the way that they were kind of dealing with it. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment.
The couple that were talking about their children who were LGBTQ, I also have a child in that space. So that definitely resonated with me just because I could connect with it. I think what it reminded me of is that's real life and that's the reality, right? We can talk about all the church teachings and the documents and make everything black and white, but there is a lived reality, and I think what we heard was that lived reality.
For 10 years. It was very special. So we come together, the fragmented body who becomes whole again. And that's what we hope to be. A small part of the body, broken, blessed, and poured out for the world.
As a married couple, we see the Synod as a powerful call that our shared life, marked by love, mutual respect, and service, is not just personal, but a model for the Church itself.
It calls for a church that listens deeply, walks with the hurting, and shares responsibility, bold enough to change. Not out of fear, but out of fidelity to the gospel. It's been a privilege
To be with you.
to be with you.
Sister Carla Thomas and Mark Guevara. And Mark really did stick out because he did share a story that was difficult in terms of what he experienced.
So the first thing, just a quick note about the terms welcoming, inclusive, and affirming. So an LGBT person like myself would hear those words and certain things would come to mind. And
it did make me reflect a little bit more, because there was a little bit of a part of me that thought, but we have to follow the things that we say that we teach. So if we're not going to do that, then are we really serious about saying we're the church? And then I can't remember when Pope Francis said it, but he said, like, no one is outside of the church for indefinitely. And it's not about imposing authority as it is of having an encounter. And that's what Jesus did, right? He didn't go around telling people the rules of the synagogue and how to stay pure in order so that you could celebrate the Sabbath. He went and had encounters with people who were very marginalized. And Mark represented that because he's coming from the LGBT Two-Spirit Plus community.
So, in a welcoming church, the folks are polite and friendly, but its theology upholds the belief that marriage is reserved for a man and a woman, and that identifying as a transgender person is a disorder. As such, a welcoming church would not allow for same-gender marriages. They would not hesitate and refuse leadership positions for 2S LGBTQ plus folks. And they would counsel 2S LGBTQ plus persons away from sexual activity. So that's the welcoming church. In contrast, the exact opposite is the affirming church. These churches, fully and without qualification, treat 2S LGBTQ plus persons equally. An affirming church celebrates and even finds a place for a person's unique gifts. In an affirming church, LGBTQ people are not barred from doing ministry in the church. An affirming church holds a theology that teaches that God created each person the way they are, and that LGBTQ plus members don't need to conform to cisgender or heteronormative social and religious constructs. And affirming churches, along with inclusive churches, are intentional about using affirming and inclusive language. And then finally, inclusive churches. So inclusive churches are similar to affirming churches in that there's full and unqualified participation in the life and ministry of the church by LGBTQ+ people. However, what makes it different is that they intentionally allow for differences in beliefs among their members. As long as those differences aren't being used to deny LGBTQ+ people their rights. So inclusive churches allow people to live out their personal convictions as long as those in privileged positions, that is straight and cisgender people, don't force their beliefs on anyone else. Now, the reality is, many of us occupy these spaces day to day. Workplaces, family homes, schools are inclusive spaces. We often operate within relationship circles that encompasses different perspectives politically, theologically, and socially. I would even say that putting a rainbow flag by a Catholic chapel, as we have, is great, but given the official teaching of the Catholic Church on same-sex sexual activity and same-gender marriage, it is more a sign of welcome than it is a sign of inclusion. It's my hope, though, my deepest longing, that being on this synodal road will bring us to a place of inclusion and eventually affirmation.
And then Sister Carla Thomas, being a religious sister, she's from Guyana, and she actually works in one of the more Afro-Caribbean friendlier churches in Toronto. That's where her home base is. So the topics that they were raising in what they were sharing, it really personally resonated.
There were some nuns there too. I think there was one that was a speaker. But she did and she was very outspoken. I was like, wow, I like this lady, you know.
Here I talked about some of the ways in which Pope Francis's theological approach could contribute to resisting patterns of coloniality in the current global system and in the church. I talked about decentralization of authority, synodality, deep listening and dialogue, and I highlighted his focus on local context and culture. At the end, one of the participants raised his hand, thanked me for an interesting presentation, then asked this question. Can we really expect, he asked, that people who benefit from a system, from the status quo, would work seriously towards reforming that system? While it may be true, he continued, that Francis has made resources available to the church, can we really dismantle the master's house with the master's stools? I paused for a long moment and then gave the best answer that I could think of at that time. I responded that it is not impossible for our pastors and bishops to actively promote reform of the church's structures, but it would require intentionality, deliberate efforts, and the support of the laity. I went on to say that although it might be difficult, the laity have a vital responsibility indeed to raise consciousness, to call for participatory processes, to build solidarity, and to engage in ongoing work that will keep the vision alive.
People came from all different experiences of synodality, but I really felt like everybody really was open to entering into that process. And like I've had experiences where I'm always having to remind people, no, you have to stop, you have to just wait, don't respond. But I don't recall that being a big issue there. Like people were there wanting to learn more about what it was and really open to having those conversations, which was neat.
So I was a facilitator, a table facilitator for the Conversations in the Spirit. And it was a little bit of baptism by fire because I had never done one of them myself. And so I felt what stood out to me was the power of silence in the conversations, the pauses. It was like music, right? That the rests give you a chance to digest what has just been communicated, what has just been shared.
Yeah, even if you have a difference of opinion, if you truly just stop and listen to somebody without already preparing your response, you have no choice but to sort of take a breath. And so even if you are in disagreement with what's being said or challenged by what's being said, you can speak to, well, I don't necessarily agree with you, or this challenges me because, without it being you're wrong and I'm right. So I find that, but to do that, you have to really ensure that the people are following the process. If they're not following the process, then you end up with exactly that conflict.
We've been doing talking circles, for forever in kind of in the Indigenous world, and the Synod, kind of copied us. I think, because my experience in Waterloo was that we sat in circles, and everybody had a chance to talk, and everybody's voice was respected. And so, in our worlds, we have talking circles that are like that, where, and actually, literally, people sit in a big circle and they pass a feather around, and whoever has the feather, that's their turn to talk. And if they want to talk for an hour, then they can.
I think it helped also just allowing me to feel more confident in being who I need to be in my identity, in my skin, as as a Catholic, as a non-religious person. Nonetheless, we're all bringing something, and we really value that throughout that process because of the listening, that we're all bringing something, and it matters.
And everyone who had the platform or had an opportunity to talk came from their point of view, and you could feel the honesty and the truth according to them come through with what they were saying. And so there was the space was very open to different people's points of views and what they wanted to say. And I didn't feel that anyone had to hold back or were afraid of what they were saying or having to kind of fight for their points of view. It was just a very open space that anyone could feel very comfortable, and the conversations were very flexible. And then I loved being in my table, getting to know those people in particular. And it was like starting a new relationship, and then having those 4 days allow us to develop kind of a small inner family. And so every time something came up, we would talk about it at our table, and the conversations at the table were the most fascinating part of the experience.
There was a wonderful openness to everyone who shared at the table. I felt people truly listened to one another, and it was so interesting to hear people's journey and how sometimes a presenter story would bump up to one of the participants at my table, maybe bump up against her story. And, at a couple of times, being very emotional about sharing the story. But there was tremendous honesty, and I really respected each participant at my table.
So I think that through Conversations in the Spirit, it gives us a space that we can have difficult conversations that allow us to walk side by side with one another, regardless of whether we necessarily agree with each other or not. But it gives us space to hear one another and still be present to one another, even in a disagreement.
I think all of us were meant to be there for different reasons. I think, if you think of the 200 plus people that were there, they were on their own little journeys, right? Everybody was there to get whatever it was they wanted to get out of it.
I felt it was a good space to share because I felt like maybe some of the things I was touching on, others maybe have never considered, or they just hadn't heard that type of perspective. I also felt I was heard. That's another thing. Attentive listening is a skill, and it's very important. It's also important to be heard. And that's one thing I feel being Black, being female in the church, my voice is not always welcomed, much less heard. So I'm thankful for the process that was not the case.
My favorite story, Father Bishop L.A. Faubert was on Zoom, and then there was a panel, and they were asking questions and talking about theology and stuff way over my head, And we got back from dinner late, like we got there just at the tail end of this panel. And I was, the minute we walked in, I was like, oh my God, there's our bishop. And so they were taking, it's so funny in a way. So they were taking questions from the audience. And I was sitting there and I said to Kathy, I said, you know what? I have a question for Bishop Ellie. He knows me. I said, she said, well, go up there, And so I went up to the microphone and I was the last question for that session.
Sego, it's going to go. Hi, Bishop. I'm Roselma McDonald
Hey,
from
how are you doing?
Hi.
Sego.
So there's about 12 of us out of this big group that are here as Indigenous representatives. And so I overheard one of our group say, we need an Indigenous synod.
At the time, I didn't know that he's the North American rep, at the Vatican, for the synod. I didn't know that. And so then, like, that was even better that I asked him that question, right? And so he said, well, I don't know, Roselma. He said, but I'll find out. I promise.
And I'm pronouncing your name as a French name, Roselma.
Yes.
Yeah. Would be fantastic if the fruits of that synod, we have them, been put forward in this coming together in exchange of gifts. The idea of exchange of gifts for me is so powerful. And so it's about, and it was about actually Pope Francis's visit in Canada when he said that we must learn, and we should, and we must learn from the Indigenous people and First Peoples of Canada, because we need healing, and there is wisdom and good ways forward in the Indigenous communities. I go back to, and I guess the synodal mindset and the synodal spirituality of listening, of understanding, of walking with, is so much part of this synodal church. So it's about coming together, but also going to your place, like going to Galilee Hall and Equiseste and in St. Regis Mission, and being there and living with the people. So yes, we're at the beginning, and I'm still learning, and I'm beginning to learn, actually. So
that was like kind of the highlight of for all of us, actually, because it was so unexpected to make those kinds of levels of contacts and the visibility.
This was it let me know that there are spaces where I can be my authentic self. And I'm glad that this existed. So I had this experience. I can always recall it. So I'm very, very thankful for the fact that they put this together, that it happened in June, weather was nice. And it was just a very unique space to be in for those few days. I don't think we wanted it to end, actually. I think everyone was like, is there a way we can make this a little bit longer?
I wrote on my notes something like, we just got to do it.
The synod has given us momentum to do different things and to work on healing and reconciliation in a legitimate way. And, with the Pope coming, and then we have the Indigenous Reconciliation Fund, it's kind of, we've put our money where our mouth is.
I think it cemented what we already knew about synodality, like for us, because I think because we were so immersed in the conversations in the spirit already in synodality itself and the importance of it, I think it just cemented. I remember the last day we were asked to do it, make a commitment, do you remember? And I remember Chelsea and I, we were chatting, we were like, okay, we don't know what's to come. And we're going to commit to finding a way to make sure to be those boots on the ground to make sure that this continues in our diocese. And so now I have found a few little ways to hopefully reignite things, but we'll see.
I think what it did mostly is gave me the confidence that my voice was relevant and is relevant, especially as a woman and especially as an Indigenous woman. I felt really that the church has a lot of faith in how our Indigenous people are going to heal and want to be a part of that journey. And so it gave me that idea that this will happen, that reconciliation is important. And it's not just kind of the buzzwords or the hope that it will happen. I just felt that there was actual steps towards that. And I know that I can be a part of that. And I really felt heard, which was, it's interesting to say, because usually it's the Indigenous people that are the quiet voices. But I really felt that there was a sense that we would be heard and that it was going to be important how we moved forward from that point.
When you encounter someone, you are transformed by that encounter. And that happens on a regular basis. And so that is what has happened, like just an increased awareness of encounters with others. Just a true heightened awareness of that.
Synodality is revolutionary in that it's following the call of Vatican II to allow lay people their full participatory right in the church.
The only thing I would love to add to you is that we are determined, the four that attended, and that we're going to try and do something on the East Coast, maybe the Atlantic provinces or the Maritime provinces. That is our goal, to invite. We want to have Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, and maybe possibly Newfoundland, that we will do something on the East Coast. We have a desire to bring others together, because I did meet someone at my table that was from Prince Edward Island. And so that's our hope. And we all lead busy lives, but we are really, really, we've talked about the importance of continuing this journey together, this journey of encounter.